this on the whole. You don't have to be a judge.
I will now call to order the regular City Council meeting of June 12th, 2023. Members of the public are invited to attend in-person meetings in council chambers. Public access to the meeting is also available by telephone by using the call-in numbers posted on the meeting agenda. Meetings are broadcast on Channel 8 for Comcast and Xfinity subscribers and on the city's YouTube channel online. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Leidy will be absent. Mayor Pro Tem Lukman Hiramasa.
Here.
Councilmember Long.
Here.
Councilmember Jaramillo will be absent. Councilmember Kondo.
Here.
Councilmember Burns.
Here.
Councilmember Goff.
Here.
Councilmember Brown.
Here.
Councilmember Walker.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All of a sudden, my mind You're okay.
City Manager Guyer, are there any responses to resident inquiries?
Nothing this evening, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda? None? Okay. Thank you. We actually have one proclamation tonight for Juneteenth. I would ask everybody to please join me downstairs. Testing? Yes. Okay. It looks like we have Everett Renberg, Chair of the Diversity, Inclusivity and Social Equity Board, also called the DICE Board, who will be accepting the proclamation. Please step forward. Okay. Whereas on June 19th, we celebrate the historical Juneteenth holiday, the oldest known celebration commemorating the end of slavery in the United States. And whereas we remember that on June 19th, 1865, Major General Gordon Granger of the Union Army and his troops arrived in Galveston, Texas, to inform enslaved African Americans who had been held captive after the announcement of the Emancipation Proclamation that they had been freed. And whereas it had taken nearly 2.5 years after President Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation for the news to reach the enslaved people in Texas. And for Black Americans, this marked just the beginning of their quest for democratic equality. And whereas in 1866, Texans began celebrating June 19th as a day of freedom. In 1980, Texas was the first state to make Juneteenth an official state holiday. In 2021, legislation was passed to recognize Juneteenth as a federal holiday. And whereas, while Juneteenth, also known as Juneteenth Independence Day, Emancipation Day, Freedom Day, and Jubilee Day, is a reminder of delayed freedom for many Black Americans, it is also an opportunity to celebrate their freedom and African American history, culture, and achievements, and for everyone to reflect on how we can ensure the country continues to live up to its founding principles of liberty and justice for all. And whereas the Juneteenth flag features a lone star in the center, a nod to Texas, a bursting outline around the star inspired by a nova represents a new beginning for Black Americans across the country. An arc represents a horizon full of promise and new opportunities, and the colors of red, white, and blue represent the flag of the United States to remind us that enslaved people and their descendants were and are Americans. Now therefore, I, Shannon Lukman Hiramasa, Mayor Pro Tem of the City of Northland, Colorado, hereby proclaim June 19th, 2023 as a day of observance for Juneteenth in the City of Northland, and encourage all residents to carry Juneteenth forward as a tradition to celebrate the end of slavery in America, and to recommit our efforts to our nation's founding ideals of freedom, equality, and justice for all Americans. Dated at Northland, Colorado, this 12th day of June 2023. Welcome, Everett. Here you go. Would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. I would just like to thank you all for your commitment to democratic and civil society. Again, thank you all for being here. And that I'm deeply honored and humbled to be receiving this proclamation on behalf of the Dice Board. We do amazing work, and I can't thank you enough for all of your support and your commitment to, again, freedom, equality, and justice for all Americans. Thank you all so very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good to see you again.
Nuggets.
1, 2, 3. Again.
Corona beer.
Last one. All right.
Thank you so very much. Yeah, go Nuggets. Yes.
That is the only proclamation.
Should be a mouse. I can suggest it.
Wonderful. Okay, the first thing on our agenda, we have a presentation, and it is our 2022 audit. I believe this will be virtual. We have Kristen Hughes, Senior Director with RSM US, will present the auditor's report to council. Kristen will be remote, and of course, Jason will be here. Take it away, Jason.
All right, well, I will turn this over to Kristen. She's
Okay.
remote, but I'm gonna flip through the slides for her. And I'll turn it over. I see Kristen is on the call, so.
Can you all hear and see me okay?
Welcome, Kristen.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Sorry, I was having some technical difficulties, so I'm just doing a little combo computer phone. I appreciate it.
It's difficult to
As
hear.
Jason mentioned,
Looks like it's on mute.
Yeah, she said she was having technical difficulties.
She's on via the phone, so if she can just speak into wherever her phone is, that will
that better?
help increase her volume.
Yeah.
Speaking.
All right, go for
can
it,
you hear
Kristen.
me better? I'm sorry.
Not really.
Is that helping?
I'm having a really hard time hearing.
Yeah,
How about
so
everybody
Pretty
am I.
else?
quiet.
Okay, how about let me try and hop out and hop back in. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'm just checking that my computer's,
There we
Oh, we
go.
can
That's
hear you.
much
I can
better.
hear you now. Fine.
okay,
We're muted.
I just hung up from my cell phone. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, that's better.
Okay,
Better.
thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for bearing with me. I apologize. As Jason mentioned, we're going to go through the results of the 2022 audit. We have a few slides to go through, but just as a quick recap before we jump in, you've been provided with a couple of documents. One is the completed annual comprehensive financial report, or the ACFR. That's going to be the large bound document. It's going to include the audited financial statements as well as the compliance work that's done on your federal grant dollars. You're also provided with a smaller condensed packet that we're going to summarize, which is those required auditor communications that we report back to those charged with governance at the conclusion of the audit. Also, just for a little perspective on the audit process itself, certainly the city's finance department and other departments go through a lot of work in getting ready for the work we perform. We usually do interim or planning fieldwork timing anywhere in that November, December, January timeframe. The city spends quite a few weeks getting prepared and closing the December 31st financials. And then we usually do the majority of our test work in the April timeframe, working through testing for a few weeks and then shift into really focusing on the financial product that we're going through. So just for perspective on, really what an audit entails, it's a lot of effort on a lot of your team members as they get ready for us. So jumping into the slides, what you'll see on page 3, As a reminder, this is the audited financial statements are going to include audit results for each of the city's individual funds, which is going to include the city's primary operating fund or the general fund, and then your second largest governmental fund is your capital projects. So here on this slide, we've summarized revenue of all governmental funds, which again, primarily is going to be the general fund and the capital projects fund. You'll see revenue in this area went up about 3.5 million or 8% year over year. It was spread across a handful of categories. Charges for services went up about $1 million. And just so you know, these categories that are presented on this slide, these are selected because these are the categories that are presented in the financial statements themselves. Sales tax, the overall tax revenue category saw about a $1 million increase compared to the prior year, most of which was in the sales tax category. And lastly, intergovernmental revenue increased about $1 million, and that's as the city has started spending down on the ARPA funds that were received. Moving on to slide 4, you'll see this is expenditures by function in those same governmental funds, so function being how those are presented in the financials as well. You'll see there was a large decrease, about $11 million in 2022 compared to the prior year. As you look at the categories, that is really all explained by the capital outlay category. In 2021, there was still the large activity as the prior year saw large construction on the rec center, theater complex, etc. So as that wound down in 2021, you'll see capital outlay expenditures significantly decreased in the current year. But most other categories, as you look through those, general government, public safety, public works, etc., were very comparable this year compared to the prior year. On slide 5, you'll see a visual here of net position for those governmental activities, or really these same funds. As a reminder, net position is the term for equity in your governmental activities. Your net position is required to be presented in 3 specific classifications. The largest one is the blue category, net investment of capital assets. So as you would expect for most all municipalities, the majority of assets, etc., are expended in infrastructure owned by the city. So you'll see this is the portion of net position represented by costs that have been built into infrastructure and other assets owned by the city. The green category represents restricted. So what that's going to mean is items that have a third-party restriction. In this category, most of this is going to be restrictions for future capital projects. So funds that have been received that are required to be used on capital projects going forward. And then that last category, the yellow, is unrestricted, so amounts that are available for discretionary spending. Similar on the next slide, you'll see this broken down for specifically the general fund as well. Again, the city's operating funds. So at the fund level, there are 5 specific categories that you're required to present in, if applicable. Non-spendable, that's going to represent a very minor amount for you all, areas such as prepaid, pre-purchased inventory, anything like that, very, very minor usually. Green is going to represent restricted. So again, if there is a third party restriction on how those funds are spent, the majority of what you have here is about $1 million. That's for that emergency reserve or the Tabor calculation that is state mandated. So the reserve that municipalities are required to maintain for that. The large category committed, this actually represents the amount that has been earmarked for council. Committed means that the council has passed a resolution or an ordinance specific for an area. So here this represents the operating reserve that has been established at the end of 2022. That amount was about $7.5 million for future operating reserve. And then the blue category represents unassigned. So from a dollars perspective, the general fund has about $15 million in fund balance at the end of the year. About 6.5 is in this unassigned category. So in addition to the operating reserve established by council, this blue category is amounts available for discretionary spending in subsequent years. Moving on to the next slide, this is the operating results for the enterprise funds. So as a reminder for you all, your enterprise funds are going to be your wastewater, water, stormwater, and sanitation services. The view or the lens on these is a little different because, again, these are viewed as a business type function similar to what you might see in the private sector, meaning you all have the ability to determine the rates on these and ensure those are at a level intended to cover operating costs. So here you'll see operating revenue was very comparable year over year when looking at 2022 compared to the prior year, as well as operating expenses, pretty limited movement in those when comparing the 2 years. Depreciation expense, just to clarify, the reason this is highlighted here is while it is a significant expenditure, it is a non-cash expenditure. That's just recognizing the amortization on the assets used to provide these services. So in that fourth category, you will see what the overall operating income was, excluding depreciation, again, simply because that's a non-cash expense. And lastly, cash flows. These are the funds that do present a cash flow statement. So again, you'll see if you take a look, what this shows is that cash flows generated from operating revenue or charges for services were sufficient to cover the operating costs for providing these services to residents. On the next slide, as I mentioned in that smaller document you're provided with, auditing standards do require the auditor to report back to those charged with governance on certain key aspects of the audit. So first of all, you'll see in the financial statements, as far as our audit opinion, we did issue an unmodified opinion. That's the formal AICPA terminology, but also known as a clean audit opinion, meaning the financials are presented in accordance with GAAP with no material misstatements or deviations noted. We also will usually emphasize if there was any new accounting standards implemented in the current year that might have changed how something was prepared or accounted for or presented in a prior year. There was a required standard this year that the city did implement, GASB 87. Both actually the GASB and FASB World implemented this standard over the last year. It just enhances some areas as far as lease accounting. There was the previous capital versus operating. This did not, just so you know, this did not have a significant impact. There's a lot of work in going through and implementing a new standard, but as far as actual dollars, this was not material to your financial statements. But what it does just go through and identify for both scenarios where you're the lessee or the lessor, establishing additional both liabilities on the financials to show what the amounts of future costs are that the city is committed to. So for an example, in a lessee scenario, if you're in a 5-year agreement to use certain assets, you now show the liability for that, but you also show an offsetting intangible right to use asset. So that was really kind of the concept behind that new standard. Management judgments and accounting estimates, you'll see those summarized there. This is just to highlight there are certain areas that within the financials that have a component of subjectivity. Examples include fair value of investments, the depreciable lives of capital assets, areas where management goes through and does have to perform some kind of an estimate. So we do take a look at those as part of the audit and make sure those appear reasonable, both in accordance with any policies that you have in effect, as well as just consistent with what we would see in comparable cities, similar industry, etc. In going through our audit work, there was one audit adjustment that was identified. So, keeping in mind the number of transactions that the city processes in a given year, as well as the number of closing entries involved in preparing the year-end financial statements, there was one audit adjustment identified. It was an entry in the capital projects fund that really just related to the recognition of revenue. So a little more specific, it relates to a receivable at year-end. To recognize revenue in the fund in accordance with GAAP, the actual cash payment does have to be received within 60 to 90 days, and that had not yet occurred. So it just simply defers the revenue recognition on that until the subsequent year. So an entry was recorded to correct that revenue recognition in that fund. There were no uncorrected misstatements identified. Disagreements with management, difficulties encountered, just so you know, auditing standards, if things of those nature came up, we would be required to communicate those to you. There were none, so no issues as far as getting information or questions or anything like that as we went through those with individuals throughout the city and performing our testing. The GFOA submission, this is good to highlight as a reminder. You all have historically submitted your financial statements to the GFOA for the Certificate of Excellence in Financial Reporting Review. So that is not a requirement. That is something above and beyond. It does enhance or add quite a few additional information and disclosures in the financials to qualify for that program. So you will see in the current year audit report or financial statements that your 2021 financial statements did receive their certificate, and that is included. And then I'm sure the finance department has already or is in the process of submitting the 2022 financials for that similar review. So again, it adds additional information and transparency in the financials and in going through that program. The next item, so as a reminder, as part of a financial statement audit, we take into consideration control areas. The purpose of a financial statement audit is not to give an opinion on internal controls, but if something comes up in the course of our testing, that will be communicated to you. As a follow-up to the audit adjustment I mentioned, just given the large dollar amount that adjustment had on the capital projects fund, there was one material weakness reported as it related to that journal entry. Again, just simply because of the impact it had on the current year income statement, but no other deficiencies were identified in the course of our testing. The next item, so as a reminder, any entities that receive and expend more than $750,000 in federal grant dollars are required to have their auditor perform what's called a single audit or a compliance audit. You all have in your financial statements, you can see the city expended just above $4 million this year. Most of that was spending of the coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery funds, or the ARPA funding. So we selected that major program for testing this year. Just for perspective, that represented about 3.1 million of the total 4.1 million. So about 75% of those federal grant expenditures were subject to sampling and testing for compliance, and we did not identify any compliance findings in the course of testing those federal grant dollars, nor any deficiencies. That was the last of the slides. I am happy to go through any questions as it relates to the audit process or the documents you've been provided in the financial statements or the auditor communications.
Thank you so much, Kristen. It does look like I have a few questions, actually. Councilmember Kondo.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So I have two questions. The first is, so you talk about this material weakness. And I'm just looking at the definition here from Public Companies Accounting Oversight Board, and it says here, material weakness is a deficiency or a combination of deficiencies, internal control over financial reporting such that there is a reasonable possibility that a material misstatement of the company's annual or interim financial statements will not be prevented or detected on a timely basis. So based on that definition, I would like to know, how is it that you came to the conclusion that there was nothing, there were no material misstatements?
Kristen?
Okay, I'm sorry. If there was a question asked, I think when I got muted, I think it turned off the audio as well.
Oh, no. Councilmember Kondo, would you mind repeating your very long question? Thank you.
Let me attempt to be concise and succinct. So you determined that there was nothing material in terms of how the city had represented its financial report. But yet, when you look at the definition of a material weakness.
I apologize. If there's a question being asked, I don't have any audio right now.
Can you repeat it and
I
see
can
if-
sign language.
Her mute button keeps going on and off. I
Kristen,
see.
can you hear me
Unmute.
at all? Can you hear us now?
I feel like the rising.
No?
Too bad we don't have the chat function.
She can't hear you either, Jason?
No, I'm not sure. She heard us before, but
Still nothing, Kristen? Oh, she can't hear me. It's obvious.
I will defer on my question,
Okay, well,
Is it one that you can answer,
Mayor
Jason?
Pro Tem.
Thank you, Councilmember
I
Kondo.
cannot answer that. Yeah.
Well, we do have two other hands, so I will let the council members ask their questions, at least so that you have a chance to, even though you might not get an answer until we figure this out. It's like Councilmember Brown.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Jason, all I want to do is say thank you. for another great year. You know, as you explained to us what happened in the Finance Committee with the one journal entry, you know, it made a lot of sense, but I'd really like you to explain to the rest of the council what happened. I think this is a great opportunity to do that. It was not a major issue or anything, but
Sure. So regarding the revenue recognition, when we do basically our governmental accounting standards or modified accrual basis of accounting, too technical of a term, so we'll just say governmental accounting, we do recognize the revenue throughout the period of reporting, so through the audit period, which actually went through May. So we made that revenue and that receivable recorded to see within the fund financial, so the capital projects fund, we recorded that revenue. When we convert it, Kristen spoke about converting entries. We just did not unrecognize that revenue for the income statement at the front statement. So it was an item that just got missed due to the timing. We needed that to be in by March 1st, and it was in March 15th, and just missed making that entry, so.
thank you. I just wanted you to explain it to council firsthand. I do appreciate it. I know that every year that I've been here, we've gotten the Star of Excellence, and you and your team did a fabulous job again, obviously, Heather, working with the auditors and getting it all taken care of. So I really do appreciate the hard work that you put into this audit, basically.
Thank you.
And Kristen, if she can hear me.
Oh, and thank you, Councilmember Brown. Councilmember Long.
I have two questions. Before we delve into what was just explained, I would like to ask, typically, what are we required to do when it comes to depreciation in terms of the timing of that? Is that, I know it's all different probably on the different buildings, but as a rule of thumb, what are you required to do, or what are we required to do?
I'm not sure.
Fast track, 24-year, 20-year? I mean,
Oh, what period do we depreciate?
yeah, depreciation, yeah.
So somewhere between 5 and 50 years, so buildings are depreciated, 40 to 50 years of useful life. Vehicles, 10 to 15 years, depending on the vehicle. Police vehicles, about 5 years,
Sure.
to speed up that depreciation.
Are those statutory requirements?
Those are not, those are part of the accounting estimates
Part of the-
that
part of the
the
gap
auditor spoke
thing?
of, yeah.
Yeah.
As long as they're reasonable and we don't say
Sure.
a vehicle is gonna last 50 years,
Well-
we can kind of do what we want.
Okay. Getting back to this, the term used in reading the audit had to do with developer contributed revenue.
Correct.
And on an accrual basis, I have some sense of this. Can you help me understand what it did to the balance sheet? Did it show up as a current liability, deferred income? Did you put it on the balance sheet?
So it is showing up on the income statement as needing to be deferred. We recognize the revenue on the fund side, and then on the income statement at the very front, we needed to defer that revenue and not show it as income for the current period. So it shows up on the income statement.
So on the balance sheet then, excuse me for,
Oh, yeah.
on the asset versus liabilities, on the asset side, is there a parentheses then around the, that income? Is that how you show it?
Yes, it does show up on the balance sheet as unavailable revenue or deferred inflows of resources,
But it's,
so as a liability.
is it bracketed then? All I'm trying to get at is how you showed it on the balance sheet, on the liability side and on the asset side.
So on the liability side, we show it,
As a current
if you're saying
liability?
liabilities bracketed, meaning a liability, yes, it's showing bracketed, specifically unavailable revenue contributions. And that's on page 23, if you're
Yeah.
looking at that specifically.
Now, the source of that, if you don't mind my
Yeah.
posturing, the source of that income, revenue, unexpended income is what it amounts to. What was the source of that?
So that-
I'm seeing it's developer contributed revenue. That, I don't know what that means.
Yeah, so that was contributions from Carl's Farm developers for the 120th roadway improvements. We're in a cost share agreement to make some of those improvements. And part of that agreement was a contribution for road work that was due to the development at Carl's Farm. And that was the source of that income.
Okay, so it's 1.8 million?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, I won't pester anymore. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem, maybe we could ask Kristen to go off the meeting and just call in on her phone? Ooh, I think we
she's
heard you.
back.
Can you all,
Great.
I'm holding on my phone, so I might be creating an echo. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Okay.
Okay.
So I would love, thank you, Councilmember Long. I would love to give Councilmember Kondo a chance to ask his question. Hopefully, third time is a charm.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Actually, I emailed my question over to Joanna so she could forward it, so I'm going to call it up here.
You're good.
Um,
You're going to.
Yeah, okay, let me try this again. So, Kristen, thank you for that great report. I guess what I'm trying to do is reconcile in my head, and maybe you can help me with this, in that the definition, according to the PCAOB, the Public Company Accounting Oversight Board, the definition of material weakness is as follows: a deficiency or combination of deficiencies in internal control over financial reporting such that there is a reasonable possibility that a material misstatement of the company's annual or interim financial statements will not be prevented or detected on a timely basis. So given that definition, and albeit it is for private companies, maybe it's a different definition for governmental entities. But I just want to know how you all came to the conclusion that, yes, there was this material weakness, but yet the overall Northglen's financial statements did not require any misstating.
Sure. So as you defined, the material weakness related to the $1.8 million adjustment, is that causing feedback?
A little.
I'm going to mute myself.
Is your computer on? Maybe try muting that.
Or turning
I
the
mean,
volume off.
Something, yeah. There we go. Go ahead.
Can you hear me through my cell phone then?
Still a bit of an echo. Nope, we can't hear you. Sorry, Kristen, you're showing up as muted.
If you mute your phone, maybe you
Yeah,
can
I'm
just
not a
talk through your
technical
computer now.
Your computer.
Mute your phone.
Yeah.
Here she goes.
The phone is, I'm sorry.
We can't hear you. I don't know how. Should she try logging off and logging back on, or?
Don't do that.
No, don't do
Nope.
that.
No.
Madam Mayor Pro Tem,
She just needs
I'm
to
more than
get her
happy to
phone.
take the answer to my question offline, since I already emailed it, and that will be sufficient for me.
If she's gonna
Thank
use
you,
her phone, she
Councilmember
just
Kondo.
needs to mute the computer and use the phone, or vice.
She just hung up, so.
Do you want to try to answer that just using your phone and leave the computer muted?
I don't think it's working. Councilmember
Okay.
Kondo agreed to just
right.
defer his question via
Computer
email and get his answers that way. So are there any further questions? I just want to say thank you so much, Jason and Kristen. Appreciate both of you. Appreciate all the work that you do to get us those stars and clean audits. So thank you very much. This is a great snapshot of the health of the city, and I think that's important. You all do a great job, so thank you. No more questions. Thank you, Jason. Thank you.
All right.
Technology is fun. Okay, moving on to public invited to be heard. This is an opportunity for public comment on any item not set for public hearing. Statements are limited to 5 minutes per speaker. Statements must be related to city business and limited to matters of community interest. Joanna, is there anyone signed up to speak to council tonight?
Yes, we have one person who signed up in advance, and that is Tom Lampo.
Thank you. Please step forward.
I love your sweatshirt.
Good evening.
Thank you.
Hello,
It's,
Tom.
30 years old.
My dad has one just like that.
It's a good thing.
Tom,
So-
please state your full name and your address and provide your comments to council.
All right. Tom Lampo, 3951 Jackson Way. So I'm here to pray for the city of North Glen. We're living in interesting times. They're difficult for many. I believe this is a marker in time. Look at the headlines and the stories. I believe the pace is quickening, deception is increasing, but truth is on the horizon. Look at what is happening with a biblical worldview. We're going to pray Psalm 91 tonight. I encourage everyone to pray this over yourselves and loved ones daily. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we invite you here to the city of North Glen. Your wisdom and presence is needed. You are a mighty God. We first want to give you praise for the answer to the prayer for the Nuggets the last time we met. Thank you. And tonight we want to lift up both teams in the finals. We ask that your hand of protection be upon all participants, that everyone performs to their extraordinary ability. And if it's in your will, we ask a blessing of victory on the Nuggets and a first ever NBA championship for them and the state of Colorado. Father, you are bound by your word and you never lie. I'm here to remind you of your words. In Jesus' name, I declare and decree Psalm 91 over the city of North Glen. You state, "He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High will abide in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say to the Lord, my refuge and my fortress, my God, in whom I trust. For he will deliver you from the snare of the fowler and from the deadly pestilence. He will cover you with his pinions, and under his wings you will find refuge. His faithfulness is a shield and buckler. You will not fear the terror of the night, nor the arrow that flies by day, nor the pestilence that stalks in darkness, nor the destruction that wastes at noonday. 1,000 may fall at your side, 10,000 at your right hand, but it will not come near you. You will only look with your eyes and see the recompense of the wicked. Because you have made the Lord your dwelling place, the Most High, who is my refuge, no evil shall be allowed to befall you, no plague come near your tent. For he will command his angels concerning you to guard you in your ways. On their hands they will bear you up, lest you strike your foot against a stone. You will tread on the lion and the adder, the young lion and the serpent you will trample underfoot. Because he holds fast to me in love, I will deliver him, I will protect him, because he knows my name. When he calls to me, I will answer him. I will be with him in trouble. I will rescue him and honor him. With long life I will satisfy him and show him my salvation. In Jesus' precious and holy name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see, is there anyone on the phone who would like to speak to council? You may press *6 to unmute yourself at this time. And I do not believe there's anyone on the phone. Is there anyone in the audience who did not have a chance to sign up who would like to speak to council? If so, please come forward, state your name and address, and provide your comments to council. Looks like we do not have anyone here. All right, moving on to communications. We will start with Councilmember Walker.
Thank you. I want to thank Mr. Lampo as he leaves for coming in and blessing us tonight. Just on a personal note, Ms. Kay and I did get to finish up the 30th baseball stadium this weekend in St. Louis, so that was fun to do. And I got to send out a few thanks here to, first one to Miss Jenny Murphy and her volunteers who planted all the flowers around the signs at our parks. They look wonderful. Miss Katie and I did our first round of weed tending at Larson Glen Park. And we just want to say thank you to the volunteers, and we will try and keep that weed free all year long. I also want to say thank you for the teddy bear picnic. It was a huge hit. Many people said to Miss Kay that they said that North Glen, they didn't even know that North Glen was a place. And then they got to come here and we got to showcase our wonderful Veterans Memorial and our rec center. So everything from the entertainment, from Clark and the Tiny Mule, they were great with the crowd, and 2-year-olds, 9-month-olds, they all had a great time. So just want to say, okay. Well, Miss Amanda, it was absolutely wonderful. I heard nothing but great things. So thank you so much. And on the last note, we'll address some comments and opinions last week from not only inside this chamber, but also outside from some keyboard warriors. And my response to those opinions is simply this: lions do not lose sleep over the opinions of sheep. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Walker. Councilmember Burns.
Thank you, Madam Pro Tem. I'd like to start my communications by saying go Nuggets. I believe just happened. So very excited. Unfortunately, had to miss the Parks and Rec Board meeting to a family conflict this week. But we had a bunch of applications for noise ordinance that were approved and some vendors, so chugging along. I attended Pride this past weekend with my family, which went off swimmingly, so thank you so much to staff. It was a great event, great food trucks, fun swag. We really appreciated the bubbles in particular. My 20-month-old really did. And I know the community really appreciated that as well. I too just had a few thoughts to share from last week's meeting. I just want to say that we here on the dais were appointed, elected to represent all of our residents, not some. And I hope that moving forward, we can show our entire community the respect that it deserves here. I also hope that we as a body can embrace change in the future and not cling to the past. Just because something has been done before doesn't mean that was the right or correct way. And it's okay to change and grow. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Councilmember Burns. Councilmember Brown.
I have a couple things, but I want to piggyback off what Councilmember Burns did say. When I was considering running for city council, I had two really great mentors. Joyce Downing, previous mayor, Joe Brown on city council at the time. The message that both of them said to me is that when you become a city council member, you leave your agendas at the door, right? No personal agendas should ever come into city council. I've taken that one wholeheartedly. And that you represent all the people in the city of Northglenn. Not just the people in your ward, not just the people that fit whatever mold that we think they should fit. We represent as an elected body all the citizens of Northglenn. And I would like to see us get back to worrying and concentrating on Northglenn and what we can do for Northglenn. And by that, what I mean is the auditors that came in last week, I really would have appreciated it if the comments that were made at the state level were then taken to our state representative, so we could have spent more time on the subject of Northglenn. That's my comment on that. So I wanted to let the residents know that next month in the Connection, a new schedule will come out for the pools. The lap pools will have, I'm looking at you, Amanda. The lap pools will have free time for our residents, so it won't be restricted. Apparently, those restrictions had been lifted previously, but there was miscommunication, and our Parks and Recreation Director is taking care of everything for it, so check your Connection. Those times will be in there. It's just too hard for me to reach out to everyone that's contacted me about that. The other thing is I would like to congratulate Heather and her team on the groundbreaking ceremony last week. I know that we went straight from the groundbreaking into the city council meeting, and I don't think I ever got to tell you how much I appreciated staff showing up with their spouses that I had never interacted with before. It was really nice, and I did enjoy my tacos. So I thought that was great. I have my third hard hat now, 2 big shovels, 1 tiny shovel, but that's about as much room as I have left. So thank you, Heather, very much for putting on another great representation of Northglenn with your team. That's all I have, Madam Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Councilmember Brown. Councilmember Goff.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Let's see, last week from June 7th to the 9th, I was up in Vail for the CC4CA annual retreat. And this is something I've gone to for the past, we did a virtual one during the pandemic, so it's been a while. And this annual retreat is when all the 42 municipalities that are represented in CC4CA that are members get together and they discuss and pass policy updates. So we did do that successfully, and I know what the proposed policy updates had been presented to our legislative committee, so Northglenn was, quite content to and happy to vote yes. Anyway, the other thing that happened at that event was that I was elected as president of the CC4CA. So I will be representing both North Glen and CC4CA for the coming year as president there. And then on June 10th, I also attended the Pride Fest. Somebody up there really was happy to give us great weather for that. It was wonderful weather, lots of people, families with kids. I was very impressed to see that. Kids dancing to the silent disco, kids dancing, during the performances. It was a lot of fun. Wonderful experience for everyone. People were thanking me and saying all kinds of positive things. I didn't hear a complaint about anything, so that was wonderful. So everyone who was there was able to enjoy it. And the comment I might make about what happened here last week is just to remind people, we've gone through this several times, and I know in the heat of the moment, it might be hard to remember, but our house rules, our protocols, one of them is that members commit to supporting council decisions once those decisions are made. And I also think that includes decisions that past councils have made, residents have made. And so even if you might not be the happiest about a certain decision or an action that the city is taking, I do believe it's important as a representative of the city to support the city. And I try to do that as well. And, I do realize that news reporters, they're always looking for a way to spin something to make it look, more exciting maybe than it really was. But I just hope that we all try to refresh ourselves on our council protocol. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Councilmember Goff. Councilmember Kondo.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. So last Wednesday, you joined me, as well as Shelley Stanley and Laura Fazim. I'm hopefully pronouncing that name correctly, Farzim, on a tour of the Rocky Flats facility. And for those of you who don't know the history of that, that was where America's strategic nuclear weapons were built, back from the 50s all the way up until the 90s. And at its heyday, there was about 800 buildings there and 6,000 people working 24/7, 365. Needless to say, there were some incidences where there was contamination released to the environment. Today, you can barely notice that anything was there. And it's very comforting to know that the $8 billion that was spent in the Superfund to remediate that site, and then to go and see it, and getting firsthand observation of the monitoring stations, the procedures and the people in place to be able to keep track of any contamination movement, which is very small, by the way. I think for me, as a nuclear subject matter expert, it gave me a sense of comfort knowing two things. One, none of the water that runs off of Rocky Flats ever gets into Stanley Lake. So that's one thing. And second of all, if any radiation or contamination starts movement, there are sensors in place and processes to be able to take proactive action long before it gets anywhere close to Stanley. So I wanted to just share that with you. I know it's a very complicated topic, and you heard me say last week, sometimes we fear the things we don't understand. And I hope that bringing you all, Mayor Pro Tem, and of course Shelley and Laura, gave you a better sense of comfort knowing what that is now. So thank you for coming. Also, I had an opportunity to have coffee with Adams County Commissioner Steve O'Dorisio, along with Mayor Pro Tem. Very interesting in that, I'm trying to still piece it all together, my membership on DRCOG and understanding where the money flows. And, if you think about it, in crime, it's like follow the money. Well, in the case of government, it's all about follow the money. Not that I'm saying government is a criminal enterprise, but it is all about trying to figure out how do you get your slice of the pie so that those resources can be brought to bear to improve the infrastructure of the city. And Steve is infamous for his napkin drawings, and I just thought I had this great epiphany, and so that was a wonderful experience and opportunity. Lastly, I would also like to just comment about last Monday's meeting, and I'm not gonna tell people what they should and shouldn't do, but I will tell you, I personally struggled with that meeting. it felt like a roller coaster. Started on the high with the groundbreaking, and then it just went in many directions. But I do want to thank, however, following that meeting, many of the people here on the days who I had the opportunity to have breakfast, coffee, lunch, what have you, so I can have a conversation, because I think it's important to seek to understand. And my understanding expanded, and I really appreciate having the opportunity to hear various viewpoints. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Kondo. Councilmember Long?
Yes, I would echo what Councilmember Brown just said about the groundbreaking last week and how the extra effort put in by staff to take care of everyone made it go very smoothly, and I want to thank you for that. It was really well done, to echo one more time. I too was at the police promotional swearing-in ceremony this last Wednesday. Chief May swore in Cynthia Pettinato, our record supervisor, as well as two commanders, Peter Rice and Justin Luck. And I was very taken with the bios presented on all three of those worthy people that have been serving for some time in our city, and I want to thank him for that. And upcoming on this Wednesday, I'm told there'll be another 10 patrolmen sworn in as well. So hats off to senior leadership in the police department for all they do and bringing these folks along to serve us well. As far as last Monday night goes, I was not going to speak. However, silence becomes acquiescence to whatever words that might be construed in one's muteness. And I would like to share with you some of the comments that came to me from the constituents that I serve. One correspondent opined, I feel that government should remain silent regarding the lifestyles and choices of individuals within our city, particularly regarding who your intimate partners are. Another opined, it was particularly egregious that Memorial Day did not merit a proclamation for our veterans. A statement being made about America's veterans not worthy, I question that, which is why I took the extra time, as you might recall, last Monday, to make a special statement to my fellow council member here, retired Captain Kondo, for his meritorious service. I think that's all I'll share right now. There's much more, but I think I'll just leave it at that. We all have our own biases, we have our own feelings, we have our own religiosity and our spirituality, and we all have our sensitivity as to being fair and honest with everybody in our community, which is what we try to live up to. And I'm sorry that some people took issue.
Thank you, Councilmember Long. Okay, it looks like it's my turn. As Councilmember Kondo stated, I also attended the Rocky Flats tour and got a quick lesson in nuclear science and chemistry, neither of which were my very strong points in school. So that was an incredible experience. Thank you, Councilmember Kondo, for letting me tag along in that. It's truly incredible to see, or just to imagine that there was a full city there with hundreds of people in a functioning city with a wastewater treatment facility and everything that a city needs to run. And it's all gone now. So I also feel a lot better about protecting our water source, which I think is incredibly important, and which is why I wanted to really attend that tour. So thank you for that. I won't repeat a whole lot, but I also met with County Commissioner Odoricio for the same reasons, and he has pretty good napkin drawings. It helped me learn a little bit more about how the funds are parsed, and I think that's important in our position here on council, and for anyone. I also attended the swearing-in ceremony for the new record specialist and our two new commanders. Congratulations, one of whom is here. Congratulations, let's give them a hand. I cannot think of two more deserving police officers to get that promotion, so well-deserved, and congratulations again. I attended the Hispanic Heritage Committee along with Jay Jaramillo, who is not here. And right now, it's a lot of planning for this huge Adams County event. It's the first of its kind, and I believe the date is October 1st. So right now, it's in the planning stages, trying to find good bands and food trucks and all of that good stuff. That's very exciting. I was very proud to show up and kick off the Pride Show. Our Pride event, as mayor was out of town. If she could have been here, she would have. It was a fantastic event. Everybody there had a great time, lots of families, great food trucks, great entertainment, and everybody was just generally very happy. It was very well attended. I was very surprised to see how many people showed up, so it was a very well attended event. I just want to remind our residents that we have a 3-week break coming up here. So after today's meeting, we won't be back in session until July 10th. I'm not sure exactly that day. It's the Monday after the 4th of July. And the reason for that, I would just like to present this to the public, is we have a huge conference. We have Juneteenth, which we read the proclamation for tonight. And then we have the CML conference, which is Colorado Municipal League. And I also want to remind everybody that I'm a presenter at the conference, which is very exciting for me. And so if you're attending CML, please attend the conference. I'm looking forward to that. And then last but not least, I will say, when I stood up and kicked off the Pride Show, I did say that there is no room for hate and there's no room for discrimination. And I personally would like to let all of our city employees, and staff, and their families, and friends and families, and so on and so forth, know that you have a city that does support you, and that, like I said before, there is no room for discrimination or for hate. It simply will not be tolerated. So I will just say that because that's how I feel. And I do have a quote, and the quote was, "We have to change the world." And this was not from someone famous. This was actually a Sunday night, I can't even remember what day, from my 3-year-old granddaughter, just out of the blue, told me, "Tutu," that's the Hawaiian for grandma, "Tutu, we have to change the world." And I thought, out of the mouths of babes, this is why I sit here. This is why I do what I do for her, for all of our kids, our future generations, future councils, and city members. So I will leave it at that. And then, moving on in communications, City Manager Guyer, do you have anything for us tonight?
I do, Mayor Pro Tem and Council, a couple updates, but first I want to apologize for the technical difficulty with the audit presentation. We typically have presenters in person. It was a last-minute request over the weekend, so Jason did make the effort of trying to make sure technology was all working earlier, so our apologies on that. Amanda's provided me with 3 updates. The first to take note of is that the Northglenn Senior Center Picnic is this Friday, June 16th at E.B. Raines Junior Memorial Park in the Ponderosa and Blue Spruce Pavilion. Please RSVP by tomorrow if you plan to attend. There are 6 new Art on Parade sculptures fully installed at E.B. Raines Memorial Park, and voting has begun. So if you'd like to vote, please visit northglenarts.org. And exciting news on the horizon for grants. The Adams County Open Space Advisory Board has recommended approval for all 3 grants that staff submitted in their spring cycle. This includes $250,000 for Fox Run South, Central, and North Parks, $300,000 for the addition of a Ninja Cross Aquatics adventure course, and $25,000 for the Park Ranger program. Council is invited to attend the public hearing, which is tentatively scheduled for June 27th. Amanda will send out details. That does coincide with the CML conference, but we'll get those details to you all. And a big shout out and thanks to Amanda and her team for the great work that they're doing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, City Manager, and I hope you're doing well.
I am, thank
Okay.
you.
City Clerk Joanna Small, do you have anything for us?
I do not have anything tonight. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
I do have one small request, if possible. Could you maybe speak to how proclamations come about, since the question was raised? So just for an understanding for our residents and for us even on the dais.
Sure. So members of the public, members of staff, and members of city council all have the ability to request a proclamation. And typically proclamations are used for ceremonial purposes, to recognize a significant event, an occurrence, sometimes individual people or groups of people in the community. And the process for requesting a proclamation for city council members is included in the city council protocol document that has been adopted by council. So that outlines the process of making the request. The requests are subject to approval by the mayor. All proclamations are written for the mayor's signature, and the mayor is issuing the proclamation. As far as requests from the public or from staff, those requests are presented to the mayor as well. They're treated very similarly. The mayor approves which ones are scheduled for a city council meeting or which ones she might issue to be posted on social media or at a specific event to recognize the occasion. Proclamations are drafted based on sample proclamations that organizations provide to the city, and that's also included in the protocol, or other examples from other entities who have made the same proclamation, and sometimes simply with data that is obtained from various sources. And let me know if I'm forgetting anything. If that covered the question or if additional
That's
information.
fantastic.
Okay.
I really appreciate that. Thank you so much,
Absolutely.
Joanna. And City Attorney Corey, how are you tonight?
I'm doing well, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, and I do not have anything to report this evening.
Thank you. Great. Moving on, we have our financial report, and we have Jason Loveland, Interim Deputy City Manager, who will provide the April 2023 update to council. Welcome, Jason. Welcome back.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, members of council. Before I start on this, I did get a response for Councilmember Condo's question. I will forward that question, the response to council, but I feel like closing the loop since we're in the midst of the conversation right now seems appropriate. So Kristen says, because the adjustment was recorded in the financial statements was why that there wasn't a material misstatement of the financial statements, since we did make that correction. However, there was a deficiency in the controls in place that should have identified this adjustment, which is why there was a material weakness in controls that was reported. If this adjustment hadn't been identified during the audit testing, there's the potential of a material misstatement in the financial statements, given the city's processes and controls did not identify this adjustment.
So,
Okay.
Councilmember Fondo, go ahead.
So is it that the fact that was discovered during the audit really
Correct.
the core concern,
Yes.
if it were, as opposed to the city's financial controls being able to self-pay?
Yes.
Is that, okay,
Yep.
I understand.
Yeah. Kind of the staff didn't recognize that entry. The auditors found it. Therefore, that's a
Okay. No,
check mark against us.
Gotcha. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yep. And like I said, I'll email that to the group, to council.
Thank you.
Anyway, jumping into more numbers to get more bogged down with numbers, other than the score of the Nuggets game. April 23 finance report. Start off with a summary of sales and use tax. Year-to-date sales and use tax are up 7% compared to the prior year. Within sales and use tax, just breaking out sales tax specifically, that's up about 6.5%. Food tax is up just over 3%. Auto use tax is really leading the charge and up 15%. And then marijuana tax is down 12%, kind of catching up from where it has been, being 15 to 18%. So seeing some gains there on the marijuana tax piece. So quickly go through the general fund. First, general fund revenues total $9.6 million through April. That is flat compared to the prior year. Large reason why we're seeing kind of through April no revenue growth is because of use tax and building and electrical permits being pulled for Carl's Farm. That is going to be a theme throughout the presentation tonight with revenues, is that we're just seeing, comparing 22 to 23, that one-time revenues coming off the books, and so it looks like we're not doing as well. However, a lot of the key revenue areas are doing well. It's just that in comparison to the prior year, it looks like that we're falling short, and that's why that one-time revenue. On the expenditure side, on page 3, we have a breakout of departments in the general fund. Total expenditures are $10.6 million. That's up just under 10% with spending as compared to the prior year. One of the columns in the middle that's highlighted is spending rate. So we're 33% of the way through the year, and you'll see in total general fund expenditures are at 29%. So we're on pace, on track with our spending in the general fund, which is a key thing that we look at when we're going over these monthly financials. So we're in good shape there. Jumping ahead to the water fund. Total revenues in this fund are at $3.3 million with expenditures of $4.8. Again, water charges, that is collects tap fees from Carl's Farm. So those are down 24%, or about $475,000 from the one-time fees collected last year. Total expenditures, nothing really to report there. Again, our spending rate's about 30% on the operating side, and we should be about 33%, so we're on track. Down at the bottom, highlighted in blue, water usage, or that's really kind of consumption reporting. That's up 3.5%. Water consumption is actually flat through April, and I'm going to speculate that May's report, possibly June, depending on how the month goes, consumption will be down even more with all the moisture we've been getting. But we'll report that next month and see if that holds true with what we'd expect. In the wastewater fund, total revenues of just under $1.7 million, expenditures of just over $1.7 million. Again, the collection and spending rate on operating expenditures, we're at 23%, so on track in that category. Wastewater charges, it shows that we're down about 3%. $191,000 is from tap fees collected in 2022. So overall, that fund is doing well in its revenue collections as we would expect. The stormwater fund, $212,000 of revenue and $137,000 of expenditures. Of note here, stormwater charges, again, collection of tap fees. It shows that it's down 16%, or $26,000. $28,000 in the prior year was tap fees that were collected. There is some spending in intergovernmental, or some revenue collection of $69,000. That's related to ARPA funds that we allocated and dedicated to stormwater improvements. And then the last fund to talk about is the sanitation fund. Sanitation revenues totaling $550,000. Sanitation expenditures of $549,000. There is an increase in trash charges, about 3%. That actually can also be contributed to Carl's Farm. We've got more people in the system paying fees. So a small increase to see a little bit of growth there with no rate changes. That's driving that. Let's see. And then again, solid waste expenditures, are in line at about 33%, which is consistent with where we are through a third of the budget. that was page 7. Page 8, as you flip through, cash and investments through April, reported at just under $107 million. You can see that purple line there, comparing years over years. Page 9 of the report shows the marketplace sales tax history chart. So we've collected January, February, and March collections. And you'll see on that chart that the orange column represents 2023, and each month has outpaced the previous 4 years of sales tax collection in that area.
Beautiful.
Page 10, Northglenn sales tax history chart. So that's just kind of a bar graph of what I had mentioned earlier, of where we're up. We'll see, again, the orange shows 2023, a little bit of a slower start in January compared to 2022, but February and March have picked up nicely overall with our sales tax collections. Page 11, this shows tax collected by geographic area, so that's within the boundaries of Northglenn, or sales that are occurring within the boundaries. And you'll see kind of some ups and downs across the different geographic areas, and overall sales within the city being flat for those first 3 months of collections that we've received. So with that, that is April 2023. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much. Councilmember Kondo.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. So first of all, I want to thank you for, on the tables, to add the prior year. As Councilmember Long suggested, it certainly helps with kind of keeping track of where we were and where we're going. So that was a great suggestion. Thank you. My question is, and I think Councilmember Brown had made that request, was to kind of figure out where sales tax revenues from online sales compares with, say, some of our major centers, whether it's the marketplace. And I believe you said last month that we're on the cusp of online sales tax revenues exceeding the Northglenn marketplace. Is that correct? Has that happened?
That is correct. That did happen, and starting in 2022, possibly 2021. I don't remember. We need to add that. We've been adding that on the quarterly report, but that is still the case. Online, out-of-city sales being delivered and paid for from residents has outpaced, as our biggest market, if you will, as compared to like the marketplace or any other geographic location.
Is it worth tracking monthly? Because I remember when we were talking about it, I personally would like to see.
Yeah, I'll add that to the monthly report.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's interesting because I try and connect one and one together. Last week I saw the CML webinar on retail trends. And they were talking about, well, is brick and mortar dead? And the bottom line, just to thumbnail it, is no, but brick and mortar might be going to smaller format stores, or stores that have some sort of drive-through portal for, DoorDash or Uber Eats to pick up their thing, that less people may be eating in a restaurant now, so therefore they don't need as much space for tables. So it's interesting to see how things are evolving, I guess, if you will. Some of it may be prompted by the pandemic, others just people and their choices now. And what it's doing is it's causing me to think about when we consider mixed use and potentially the notion that we have retail, for example, at Carl's Farm, and maybe there's some struggles there. Are we really keeping up with the times? So, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Brown.
I'm not sure my question's going to be right. I'm going to just tell you that right away. Where it says is Office Plaza, and then off to the side we have Diamond Shamrock. Is that the one off of Claude Court? Where is that one?
Office Plaza over at Huron.
It just says Office Plaza and then Diamond Shamrock, sample area business.
I think that is
next to the fire station.
Huron and 112th.
Huron in 112?
Next to
On
Station
the
16.
corner.
Office Plaza, and then maybe it's changed names and it's not Diamond Shamrock anymore. I'm not sure.
No,
But
it
that
probably
should be the
is.
location.
No, in my mind, I'm trying to, because I know that 120th is up and running, right? Construction is, poof,
Yeah.
it's going on, and it's causing, as predicted, a lot of problems. So I was wondering how we would be able to track if there has been any less activity, where the activity has dropped in any of our stores. But that gas station that's on the corner of Claude and 120th, that's Thornton, isn't it? Anybody? No?
No, that's Northglenn, and that's the one listed here as East Lake.
Okay.
So Santiago's, Jiffy Lube, and Circle K.
I really want to keep an eye on them, even though they're showing positive, because I can't figure out yet how to get into that particular gas station. So I'm wondering how much have you, it's a little hard. So I would just like to see if we start to see a trend where what's going on at 120, not that we can do anything, but we can at least extend a hand if there's a problem, right? Yeah, that would be, I'm very interested in that.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Jason. Another fabulous job.
Thank you, Councilmember Brown. Councilmember Long.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Appreciate it. Jason, thank you for putting in the comparative year. I really appreciate it. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you, Councilmember Long. Jason, thank you so much, as always. I don't have any other further questions to ask, so we appreciate you.
All right,
Thank
thank
you. Have a good night.
Can I ask one more question? Sorry.
Go ahead.
Jason, will you have the numbers that I requested on the expenses by our next finance meeting? You think? That's the one on?
Yes.
Yes, so you'll have that
By
for
the
us?
end of July, yes, I will have that.
You rock.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's a long walk. Okay, great. Moving on to our consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion to approved?
Somebody
Second.
second? Okay. Joanna, please open the vote.
The vote is open.
Please vote.
I will close that vote, and the consent agenda passes unanimously.
Thank you. Next, we're moving on to a public hearing. We have CB 2008. Joanna, will you please read the title?
A bill for an ordinance amending Article 9 of Chapter 7 of the North Glen Municipal Code, expanding the definitions of types of electric operating devices permitted to operate in the city.
I will now open the public hearing on CB 2008. Joanna, did anyone sign up in advance to speak either for or against?
No, nobody signed up.
Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak either for or against CB 2008? No. Doesn't look like we have anyone online via phone waiting to comment. Hearing none, I will close the public hearing. Great. Next up, we have ordinances on second reading. We have CB 2008, which Joanna just read the title. Is there a motion to approve CB 2008 on second reading?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Amanda Peterson, Director of Parks, Recreation, and Culture, will provide a summary of the item. Hi, Amanda.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. So this amendment clarifies the definitions of OPDMDs and e-bicycles, ensures that e-bicycles and e-scooters are treated the same as required by state statute, and outlines where those devices can be used. No changes have been made to the ordinance since the previous review on first reading. However, we have added a chart to help clarify each type of device and where it can be used, as well as any other associated restrictions that would be on that device. So hopefully that's helpful for you. And then finally, I would like to apologize to Councilmember Long. I misspoke in response to your question at the last meeting. You asked us about carts, and I said they were not permitted, and I was incorrect. Per the definition of an OPDMD or another power-driven mobility device, a golf cart is allowable for use as a mobility device.
Wow.
So I
Thank
just
you
wanted
for
to
that.
clarify that for you.
Well,
And I apologize, I had it wrong the last
I'll have a
time.
very happy constituent when I share that with them. Thank you kindly.
Are there any other questions that I can answer for council?
It looks like I have one hand. Councilmember Goff.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you this, and this may not even be the time and place to do it, but all these are electric vehicles.
The other power-driven mobility devices are not specifically restricted to electric because they're mobility devices for individuals who have a mobility impairment.
Well, I guess my concern is that recently saw a very, well, young child riding with like a tiny little motorcycle, and it looked apparently gas-powered. So I just was wondering where that fit in.
So that would be likely, without seeing it, likely a toy vehicle, which would not be permissible.
That's kind of what I said to the person who was asking me about that. And we talked last time about how toy vehicle is a little bit vague, but that's just kind of the way it is. Okay, got it.
Are there any other questions? Thank you for the pictures.
Of course.
I love that you added pictures. You're like, you know what, I'm going to give them some photos just to help clarify what it is we're talking about. And of course, I'm going to ask, so tell me again where the electric unicycle falls under, because I saw one of those. I just have to do it.
I believe an electric unicycle would fall under the e-bike category. It
okay.
doesn't specify the number of wheels on the bicycle.
Okay, that's great. This person was very careful and, giving out audible warnings that on your left. So I thought they were very responsible. I thought I would just check.
Yes.
Are there any further questions from anyone? Okay, thank you so much, Amanda. We
Thank
appreciate
you.
you. Joanna, will you please open the vote?
The vote is open.
Please vote. Get mine.
We'll close that vote, and CB 2008 on second reading passes unanimously.
Thank you. Next, we have ordinances on the first reading. We have CB 2004. Joanna, will you please read the title?
A bill for an ordinance amending Section 11-4-6 subsections E and G and Section 11-6-8 subsection C of the North Glen Municipal Code.
Is there a motion to approve CB 2004 on first reading?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Thank you. We have Brooke Svoboda, Director of Planning and Development, and you'll provide a summary of the item. Welcome, Brooke. How are you?
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. Really quick, there's three things for this amendment. We're looking at making the EV regulations in the UDO consistent with the building code. The Planning Commission has been going through an extensive review of their bylaws and processes, and one of the things that came up in that review was some minor amendments to the language in the UDO regarding the Planning Commission. One of which is that there is a reference to a bona fide resident, which we don't know how to define, so we're taking that out. The other is that the Planning Commission also seeked to add a ninth member that would serve as an alternate in the event that there is an absence. So just more or less trying to expand the flexibility. I will tell you that in my tenure here, we have always struggled to even keep a full commission. So having the ability to have an extra member that would be an alternate would be an ideal. And then lastly, while we do this once every 10 years or 5 years, depending on how you look at it, we also overlooked administratively that we didn't have the state statutes in our UDO for adoption of the comprehensive plan in our code. So we just figured, hey, we're going to grab that and put that in here as well. Some of you may be saying, didn't we just do this? And we did. These are things that were actually in progress when we were drafting that ordinance of the last errata, and that because of these are somewhat trying to make things consistent with these various things and the processes going on with the Planning Commission, we brought this back separately. These are relatively minor, and that's the purpose of the amendment.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions? We're quiet tonight. Thank you, Brooke.
Thank you.
Really appreciate that. Joanna, will you please open the vote?
The vote is open.
Please vote.
I will close that vote, and CB 2004 on first reading passes unanimously.
Thank you. Next ordinance on first reading is CB 2009. Joanna, will you please read the title?
A bill for an ordinance amending Article 2 of Chapter 18 of the North Glen Municipal Code regarding the new fermented malt beverage and wine license class and to permit tastings at fermented malt beverage and wine retailers.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Thank you. City Clerk Small will provide a summary of the item. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and council members. So CB 2009 is being presented to council on first reading tonight. It would amend the municipal code related to the fermented malt beverage and wine licenses and also allow those licensed retailers to apply for tasting permits. So last November, Colorado voters approved Proposition 125, which was the wine sales in grocery stores and convenience stores initiative. So accordingly, the Colorado liquor and beer codes were amended to establish that new class of license, which would allow grocery stores, convenience stores, and other businesses that were already licensed to sell beer for off-premises consumption to then also sell wine for consumption off-premises. Colorado became the 40th state to allow wine sales in grocery stores. As a result, all of the existing fermented malt beverage licenses were automatically converted to the new fermented malt beverage and wine license. And that happened on March 1st of this year. So the liquor and beer codes were also amended to allow licensees that hold the fermented malt beverage and wine license to apply for tastings. So to amend the municipal code to be consistent with state statute, that would allow those retailers to also be able to apply for tastings here at the local level. Tastings have a whole set of requirements on their own. There's a formal process where retailers must apply for the tasting. They must submit a schedule of the day and time for the tastings 30 days in advance to that tasting. And tastings require the approval of the liquor licensing authority. They're not used very often here at the city of North Glen, but amending our code to be consistent with state would allow the eligibility to be there. So specifically, CB 2009 would change the fermented malt beverage license to the new class of license to include wine. And the ordinance would also allow those retailers to be eligible to apply for permits. The draft ordinance was presented to the North Glen Liquor Licensing Authority at their May 18th meeting, and the authority passed a resolution recommending approval of the proposed ordinance to City Council. If CB 2009 is approved on first reading, a public hearing and second reading of the ordinance will be scheduled for the July 10th regular City Council meeting, and I'm happy to answer any questions from council.
Great. Oh, Councilmember Goff?
As we heard the explanation, I got my question answered.
Great.
Thank you.
Councilmember Brown?
Hi, Joanna.
Hello.
That was kind of like a squeak. You know where I am with this particular issue, right? Where can I find what rules that we'll have set up in Denver, or not Denver, we're in North Glen, in regards to tasting, especially wine tasting and things like that? Is there a separate documentation done, or does the liquor board then come back and say, besides that 30 days prior to get a permit or whatever, is there anything that says that only 21-year-old people can be in attendance? Yeah, that's the kind of background that I'm looking for. So where can I find that?
So those regulations were adopted at the state level, and the city adheres to those regulations. They're already in place.
Okay.
The city previously authorized tastings to be held in the city of North Glen. So those regulations are already in place. I can definitely send council a document that lists those. Our licensing administrator has given me some of the regulations here. And it's a lot of sort of what you mentioned. They're not allowed to sell to persons under the age of 21. There are certain times that tastings can be held. It's between 11 a.m. and 9 p.m. They're limited by number per licensee per year. Let's see here. The size of the sample is limited to 1 ounce of malt or vinous liquor or 1/2 ounce of spirituous liquor. Samples must be served in cups marked to indicate the size of the sample, and samples are limited to no more than 4 per person. And let's see here. There are rules regulating what happens after the tasting. The licensee must remove all of the unopened and unconsumed beverage samples from the sales floors immediately following. Samples shall be in open containers and shall be provided to patrons free of charge. And violation may subject the licensee to the same revocation, suspension, and enforcement provisions that would otherwise apply to any other liquor licensed business, say if they were caught selling alcohol to a minor. So there are provisions that can be enforced if someone is found to be violating the rules.
So I'm just going to ask this question.
Yeah.
Because you knew I was going to anyhow. Is this saying that I may walk into Safeway one day and they'll be doing a wine tasting in the back by the lobsters?
Yes, they would be eligible to apply for a tasting. The city would know that that was happening in advance because as part of that tasting permit application, that's where the licensee has to identify the days and times that they want to conduct a tasting. And then that application is what is presented to the liquor licensing authority for approval. So the city would know when the tastings are going to be held. They could be, the police department would be made aware so that we would know why there are, tiny samples of basically open containers on the premises. And I asked how many tastings the city has had since they have been allowed, and the number is 1. So they're not used that often here. And at that time it was at a retail liquor store, which is a little different when they have, want to sample wine and such, so.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yep.
Any other questions? Councilmember Long?
I see the attorney shaking his head vehemently there, so I was wondering if you had a comment.
No, Joanna hit every one of the regulations related to tasting. She was spot on.
While I have the floor, if I might.
Please.
I want to recognize Beth McElree as our newest Planning Commission member. Congratulations this evening.
Yay.
You were approved in the consent. Thank you again for serving and willing to serve. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Long. Those were great questions, Councilmember Brown. I had some of the same questions, but it sounds like there's lots of regulations in place and they have to notify in advance. I always think of a wine tasting as like a vineyard.
Yeah.
So this is a really new concept that I'm trying to kind of figure out in my head. But as long as there's lots of regulations, which it sounds like there is, and plus, it's something that we need to comply with. So I don't see any other discussion, so please open the vote.
The vote is open. I will close that vote, and CB 2009 passes unanimously on first reading.
Thank you. Moving on to resolutions, we have CR 87. Joanna, will you please read the title?
A resolution accepting the audit of the annual comprehensive financial report for the City of North Glen for the year ended December 31, 2022.
Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Great. We have Jason Loveland back, interim deputy city manager.
Mayor
Luckily,
Pro
you
Tem,
didn't walk too far.
Council members, thank you. Again, as the title read, this is the council's opportunity to accept the financial report as presented by the auditor, which she vehemently apologizes for the issues earlier tonight with technology. Interestingly, she was flying in from Kansas City today. We changed course. Her flight was delayed. She would have been late to the meeting anyway. So apparently that was not meant to be. So anyway, the external audit, it's an essential element of the process of accountability and to provide an important contribution to the stewardship of public resources. So on an annual basis, we have an audit. Some auditors come in and dissect everything that we do as a finance department and organizationally to make sure that we're in compliance with our different rules and regulations. So as Kristen mentioned earlier, we were provided a clean opinion or unmodified opinion, which means that the financial statements were fairly presented in all financial aspects. So staff recommends approval of CR 87 to accept the 2022 annual financial report.
Great, thank you, Jason. I have a question, Councilmember Condo.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So I just want to make sure I heard correctly, but did Kristen say that the scope of their audit didn't necessarily include the financial controls of the city, or maybe I misheard that?
They also issue a report on the controls.
Okay, so
of,
they are-
of internal controls.
So they do look at that?
Yes.
And that was within scope of the evaluation?
Correct.
Of the assessment?
Yep.
Great. Councilmember Goff.
Yeah, this is kind of a question I'm personally curious. Has it ever happened, or what would happen if the city did not accept this report? Is there some, I mean, does it ever happen? Is there a process, like you appeal it or something?
It's a wonderful question. I am not aware of what would happen if council were to not accept the resolution to accept the audit.
I'm not aware either, but part of the reason you accept it is it has to be independent, but it also has to be submitted to the state. And so this is part of the process of authorizing this to be submitted ultimately to the state. It's part of the obligation under state law to submit the audit. But I don't think there would be a mechanism to not accept it, because frankly, the whole purpose of this is to have an independent audit.
Right, and that really does address, I guess, what I was wondering about, that what we're really doing is saying, okay, send it on.
Yes.
Thank you.
That's a great question. It got us all thinking,
I was
what
wondering,
would
why
happen?
do we have to approve it if there's no,
We all want to know.
no way not to?
Do we have any other questions? No? No? Okay. Hearing none, please open the vote.
The vote is open.
Please vote. I can find my thing.
I will close that vote, and CR 87 passes unanimously.
Next up, we have CR 89. Joanna, will you please read the title?
A resolution approving an agreement between the City of North Glen and Goodland Construction Incorporated for the Connect North Glen Multimodal Improvements Project.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Thank you. Great. We have Kent Kisselman, Director of Public Works, who will provide a summary of the item. And thank you, Jason.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and Council.
Hi.
I'll start by thanking Heather and Jason and Joanna for allowing us to come forward. We truly received the phone call on Wednesday, the date of packet posting, that this was finally approved. So we did not want to wait another month to get it in front of you so we can get going. So this is our Safer Streets grant that we received back in 2021. We bid it out one time, and the bids came back higher than the amount that we had allowed, and so we had to rebid it. We had to take out some scope because the CDOT doesn't allow you to make adjustments. So we've been through the process on this, but this time we did receive a bid in the amount of $632,537. We will be doing 7 streets, and those are kind of listed in the back, including the entire Fox Run Parkway. And this is the striping with our Connect North Glen program, and then we also utilize this program to narrow down the lanes to do some traffic calming as well. So staff recommends approval as presented, and I'll answer any questions you have.
Councilmember Condo.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I don't have any questions, but I did want to, while Kent is at the podium, just recognize him because I had a question not related to this piece, but regarding the urban drainage infrastructure on Grand Hall Creek, and he was very generous with his time to help me with my understanding. So I just wanted to make a public statement to thank him and his staff for doing just that. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I just want to say thank you as well, Kent. This is amazing and exciting. You know, anything that has to do with roads is always very exciting news here in Northland, and this is a fantastic next step. So thank you so much for all the hard work that you put into this.
You're welcome, thank you.
Do you want to please open the vote?
The vote is open.
Please vote.
And before I forget, thank you for those little white lines on that spot. I just couldn't figure out what they were for.
You're welcome.
Helped me a lot.
I'll close that vote, and CR 89 passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kent. Great. We made it through the voting section. Next up, we have discussion items. The topic du jour, we have the 4th of July fireworks operational plan, and we have brand-new police commander, Peter Rice, will present the fireworks plan to council. And we also have Deputy Chief here. Hi, DC.
Thank you, ma'am.
Welcome.
And that's not it.
Right arrow, just give it a couple pushes.
There we go.
Okay.
Good evening. Before I get going, if I could say, firstly, thanks for your comments earlier. I know that has nothing to do with this, but I appreciate that, you taking the time. And I'll make sure that Cindy and Justin hear what you said tonight too. So, not that has anything to do with the 4th, but I appreciated that. So when we get into this year's plan, same as last year as far as having it in the park, although we're hoping the fireworks go off this year.
Don't say that.
I know, but we're changing that. They will
Knock
go
on wood,
off.
everybody knock on wood.
Ma'am, it jumped a whole bunch when I just hit it one time.
Do you want to tell me and I'll do it?
No, it jumped.
Oh, gotcha. Here, right, she'll fix it and then you'll be able to. Uh-huh.
So our plan is the same as last year. We're going to have a heavy police presence in the park. We're going to keep Community Center Drive open throughout the day so that folks can load in, unload. But as you're all well aware, our footprint here keeps changing every year, as now we don't have the road here on the south side. We're going to continue to maintain fireworks enforcement throughout the weekend. When you look at the numbers that were high, those were the years that we weren't having the festival, right? So we had to reallocate resources last year back into the park, because that's our primary concern when we have this many folks gathering in one place. We'll have our fireworks enforcement teams out throughout the entire weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We'll have them in the evening hours when we know that we're going to get the most complaints for fireworks. But we just wanted to make you aware that when it gets on the 4th, we're going to have a heavy concentration here just due to the congregation of people here over at EB Rains. As you are well aware of the plans throughout the day, that's on the website. The fireworks will go off sometime after 9. We'll get in conjunction, myself and Diana, we'll work with, because it'll be done on the east side of the park. It's going to be a little bit different this year, as they won't be out in the water. So we're going to have to, from a safety perspective, we're going to have to shut down. Normally, folks can walk around the park, but since we're going to be on the land side of things, we're going to shut down that sidewalk once it gets close. So we'll have some more officers over there to make sure that that takes place as well. For staffing for us, we use everybody. Everyone will be here all day. There's a breakdown of the officers throughout the time. We've got, when it comes to trainees, those are some of the folks that will be swearing in on Wednesday night. So they're newer, so we use them for some different things until we can get them trained out on, but you'll have a large concentration of us at night to ensure that the pedestrians can get back out of the park, get to their cars, and we'll pull the barricades and we'll reopen the road to get everybody out here as safe as possible. Some other areas that will have just because of the amount of pedestrian traffic down off of Malley and High Line, right, for folks that walk there, so we can get to the crosswalk. And we've always worked in conjunction with Thornton down at Fox Run, just because their festival is extremely large too, and it's right just to the east of us. So when they push the traffic there, it just kind of, we have to contend with it as well. So we have to allocate a bunch of officers down there to help out that. We'll have North Metro with us over by the boathouse, so we'll have on-scene medical personnel should anybody need it. Just like we've always done, here's kind of breakdown of where we'll be shutting down the roads. We'll, depending upon if Mother Nature cooperates or when she cooperates, we'll try to, about 15, 20 minutes prior to launching of the fireworks, excuse me, we'll shut down the roads. So the folks that are in the parking lots on the west, once we close those barricades, they're gonna, and we'll release them, just like we did last year, just because we don't want to contend with vehicular traffic while people are staring up in the sky and if someone walks out in the road and stuff like that. So we want everything shut down while the fireworks are going off. And then once that's open, we're going to push everybody southbound, just like we did. Kind of like when you're coming out of the Nuggets game tonight, the majority of the stuff you're going to do is you're going to make right turns because it's easier, it's safer, and we'll be able to get folks out of that. We'll have all the signage posted prior to, or as much as we can, right, digital signs, just to kind of let the residents know that we'll have, you know, some detours for them to work around throughout the course of the evening. That's pretty much it. I missed anything? I don't think so. Questions for me? We good?
Yes, we do. Councilmember Kondo.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So is the intent similar to like the food truck carnival to have most of the people who are driving to park over at the RTD and then walk over? Is that kind of the design or?
It is, although food truck carnival is closed for a much greater period of time. But it's not going to take long for our lots to fill up. The thing with the 4th is about 5 a.m. when the park opens, you'll start seeing a lot of traffic where people are unloading their stuff to stake their claim on where they're going to spend the day watching the fireworks. So yes and no, once it gets to that time, you'll see, once it starts to get to dusk, that's where a lot of this stuff, just because the parking lots will be filled prior to that. They're not going to have that much of a choice. So as much as I know Diana works with pushing that stuff out for folks, for them to park, better off we'll all be. And we'll, all that stuff, we work in conjunction with the city folks as far as lighting that underneath the walkway. That's part of our regular patrols. We'll be on the gators just to make sure that that underpass that goes over there to the RTD, just to make sure that that's clear and it's safe for folks.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Burns.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. I had a question about page 6 in our packet, slide 4, about the fireworks enforcement. So you stated that like the severe drop-off is from when we started hosting the event, correct?
Back in person, where we actually hosted it at EB Rains, yeah.
So is that because everyone came to enjoy our fireworks instead of lighting them at home? Or is it because just the police force is condensed in one area?
Both.
Okay.
Both. I think it's a combination of multiple factors, right? It's no secret now when you looked at what was going on in the metro area during COVID and the amount of home fireworks shows, right? That isn't as bad. I'm not saying that everybody is abiding by all of the laws, but that has significantly dropped. Our enforcement, the amount of public education, even in conjunction with the fire department, to say it's not that this has been an overly dry season, but just that it's not safe. And the fact that we're out the entire weekend enforcing it has helped us and so that we haven't. But when we're gonna have as many thousands of people we are in the park, we have to be there. That has to be the focal point of our, so when we have that many there, I don't have as many to go out on the street.
So, thank you so much. But then, like, follow-up question, I don't know if it's for you, Heather. So does the number, has the number of, like, reports through, like, the app, does that correlate with this as well? Of, like, people doing at-home fireworks? Does it significantly drop off last year?
We would have to look, we didn't necessarily look at that data in relationship to building this PowerPoint, so we can check on that. If residents want to issue a firework complaint, it's better to call which number? Non-emergency or 911?
Yeah, non-emergent, and they'll go into queue, because the numbers have, and again, that would be data we could pull through dispatch, right? If they, as far as those calls for service, compared to during the height of COVID. But non-emergent, right? Because we have regular 911 issues to deal with too. So that they'll prioritize it just like they always do.
Great, thank you. Heather, that's a good piece of information to call non-emergency line.
Yes.
To report over the. Thank you for that.
So an additional plug, do not call or text Heather that weekend or the days leading up, because I get in trouble with the chief. It actually adds several steps to the process. So a bit in jest, call the non-emergency number, and certainly call 911 if it's an actual emergency. But if you text or call me, then I've got to relay that through multiple channels, and it's not going to get to the police as quickly.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's a great question. Councilmember Long.
Madam Mayor Pro Tem, thank you. Commander,
Yes, sir.
my question runs like this.
Okay.
After the big soiree at the park,
Yes.
in my neighborhood, Ward 4, we've had lots of home fireworks going off midnight, 1 o'clock, 2 a.m. And I don't want you to share necessarily your strategies, but I don't know how many folks you'd have around to get around to these other places after everything closes down at the park. I'm just wondering if there's any way of, I know it's a hard response, I know, I'm just thinking out loud here, following up on Councilwoman Burns's question.
We know it's going to be an issue. That's why we've tried to push the majority of the staff for after when it gets dark, because we know that that's typically when the volume of calls have come. We understand that fireworks complaints are going to come in. I hope that that's what our guys are focused on that night, because if they're unable to get there, they might be dealing with other things that are on a higher priority
I
call.
totally understand the 911, absolutely.
That's the, we get it, and we'll do the best we can, and I have as much staff as I can pushed back into the night. Like you said, without going into our operational
Yeah,
stuff.
don't give away the
Right.
plan.
We'll do the best we can with what we have.
Yeah. I know our city manager's worried about calls coming into her. I can guarantee I'm going to be getting calls because they know I'm on council now, and now it's ring-a-ring.
Right.
So, thank you for your good efforts and your good plans. I'm sure you're going to do your level best. Thank you.
We will certainly try.
Great.
Councilmember Long, your phone will say ringing from what? Maybe the 30th of June through the 4th of July? Yeah.
Probably.
It will not stop.
Looks like Councilmember Condo has another question.
Yes, ma'am, thank you. So I just wanted to be sure, we talked about the non-emergency line, but there's also on the Northland app, which I think Councilmember Burns, you talked about, under police services, you do have fireworks. So just for the public or anybody who's watching, the Northland Connect, the Access app is another way to.
You can use Access Northland. What I'm trying, my point in clarifying why not to use it the night of is the police aren't going to get that notification
Okay, gotcha.
right away. So with the volume of activity that takes place on those nights leading up to 4th of July and even the night or two after, there's such a high volume of calls that are coming into the department that if you have a neighbor or resident within your ward that is calling you and saying, my neighbor is shooting off fireworks next door and has for the last hour, they need to call the non-emergency number. As Commander Rice indicated, the call taker will log it and then prioritize it and have an officer go out on scene. If you log it into Access Northglenn, it's not going to get to them
Okay.
that
gotcha.
night.
So it'll back, so for that night, call it in. Okay, gotcha, thank you.
Yep.
And also congratulations on your promotion. I
Thank
was
you.
also present.
Appreciate all you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I just want to say, I love that the goal is quality community interaction. I mean, that the first thing I think about that is community safety and making sure everybody has a good time while you are all trying to work very hard to do your job. So I just want to say I really appreciate that. And I know that having staffing, all available police resources, I know that means that there's a lot of police officers who cannot spend that holiday with their families. So I just want to extend my gratitude to them and just let them know that we appreciate them because this is a big event for the city and there will be an enormous amounts of calls. I live by the Northwest Open Space, so talk about getting the calls. It's nonstop. I won't text you, Heather. I won't call you. But I just want to say thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Appreciate that. All hands on deck.
It is.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Commander. Thank you, DC. Excellent. We have one more item for our agenda, and that is Civic Center Parking Analysis Proposal. Brooke Svoboda, Director, I just want to say it now over and over, Director of Planning is back to present the proposal to council, while I still can say it.
You know,
Hi, Brooke.
The dude works as well, so I just want to say that's also
Just
off
just
the
Brooke,
table.
the dude.
The dude, you know, it's good.
It's great.
Good evening once again. What we're here tonight for this discussion is a check-in before moving forward with this exercise. Being that this is a council concern and was raised as a priority, we are here just to sort of make sure that there's not something missing or that there's something else that we need to be thinking about when we're looking at this this discussion item tonight. What we're here talking about is that we're going to do a parking analysis for the Civic Campus. I would characterize this as a refresh of the parking analysis that we did during the master planning process. A lot has changed. We've had a lot of feedback from seniors and the NHF. So this exercise serves multiple purposes, or you could say serves multiple masters in that regard. Having said that, a couple things that I want to just cover here really quickly is that the biggest dynamic that seems to be driving this conversation as far as a concern for council that staff has taken away from is that the programming at the rec center in totality is probably greater than what we anticipated when we originally designed for it. As a general rule, when we look at parking, we say, this is the building, these are the uses, we have a formula, those are the parking spaces. Right now, there's more parking there today than there was before the old facility. We have public perception issues that we are going to look at and addressing through this exercise. We're also going to be looking at this from a strategic standpoint of today, intermediate, and long-term. In that long-term perspective, we're going to look at not just the south half, where the main focus of this conversation, of this exercise is going to be. We're going to look at what that conversation has as far as implications to the north half. Now, anecdotally, the understanding and perception that we're looking at is, the feedback we get is no one wants to walk across Festival Lawn, they don't use that parking. So we're taking that into account as how we look at how we program parking here. And primarily what we're talking about is the site that we're in right now, which is the old city, which is the current and soon to be old City Hall. How do we utilize that space? Is it enough parking space? And if it's not, what do we really need? The other part of this is that we look at when we go into this exercise is to really look at the programming, current and projected programming for the rec center. And right now, I would suggest that based on fundamentals of how we look at rec center programming, we are programming at a higher level than you would say your standard John Q. rec center. Think of the Apex Center out in Jefferson County. That thing is fully booked every single day, all the time. You can look at other rec centers and say, oh, they don't have that same utilization. We're scaling to a higher utilization, so we need to take a closer look at what that means in an interim, long, and short term. So really, this is a comprehensive approach. We're going to be looking at different options and techniques. It's not necessarily building something to solve an equation. It could also be what we call TDM, which is travel demand management. We look at how parking can be utilized off-peak. Now, for those who were around, I'm looking at Becky, when we did the original analysis, we didn't have enough parking in the master plan to accommodate everything, because if we did, we wouldn't have anything because we'd be all parking spaces. So what we looked at is what we called off-peak parking demand analysis, where if City Hall is closed at night, there can be more, that parking space can be utilized for programming for the rec center. And conversely, we're going to take that same sort of approach to make sure that we're not just building parking fields for the sake of building parking fields. We want to be intentional about how we approach this. So having said all that, we've got a lot of public engagement involved with stakeholders, and we've identified the senior population as well as the NHF. We also have built into this one-on-one check-ins with the council, so as to sort of get that individual touch if you so desire. That's going to be optional, not required. But what our goal is that we're going to collect this data, we're going to get some feedback, check in with you before we come in and make recommendations. It'll largely be like an informational exercise, but it'll also be an opportunity for you guys to have that individual time to process and digest what we're coming up with in terms of that direction moving forward. There is a schedule in here. This is essentially a 3-month process. So being that if council has consensus for what we put together, and if there's any tweaks we need to do, we'll update them. But the idea is that upon tonight, we'll circle back, we'll get a professional services agreement started, and we'll get started with this, and this will be under the city manager authority for authorization. So with that, I'll stop talking and help answer any questions.
Great. Councilmember Goff.
Thank you. So Brooke, I guess I'm not sure if this is going to come out in your process, but I feel like the construction that's going on now has impacted who's choosing to come to the rec center. I noticed that with pickleball. People are intimidated by all the construction. So, I mean, if you're just going to evaluate like how much is being used right now, I think that also should be taken into consideration. That if there was no construction, there might be more people coming.
Sure. I think the best way to answer that question is we will be taking that into account. We're going to be doing drone footage. The idea is to get more of operationally what it looks like on the peak hours, and we're going to be looking at 3 different segments, morning, noon, and night, and probably look at the weekends as well when there's not necessarily activity on construction happening. But I would say the better way to get to your concern or the point that you're making is we're going to look at the programming, okay? So let's look at, if we've got a theater event going on, and we've got a swim meet going on, and we've got all 3 event spaces going on, what does that look like from a parking impact? We don't need to necessarily have construction or not construction there to know that that creates an X factor of utilization of parking demand, and we can figure that out.
Yeah, I just happened at the Pride Fest, for example, some, parking spaces were open right up by where the event was taking place, and I talked to some people, and they had just assumed and parked across the street, so that kind of thing.
I will tell you, I went to Cheeseman Park this weekend, and we saw a parking space 3 blocks away, and we said, we better grab it. We walked right up, and there was like 12 parking spaces right next to the park. So yes, I totally get that, yeah.
All right, thank you.
Councilmember Kondo.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. So first of all, I want to thank you, Brooke, for meeting with me earlier today, because when I saw this on the agenda, I wasn't quite sure how to think of it. But now that you're describing it, I'm kind of inspired by the movie, the Kevin Costner movie, the baseball field, where, build it and they will come at the very end of the scene, Now you've got this long line of cars coming from all over, and now you got to figure out where to park them. So I think you're bringing up a very good point, which is, we built it. We built this wonderful rec center, theater, and now it's, as you're talking about, as programs are ramping up, we're trying to figure out how to put 10 pounds in a 5-pound sack.
It's a good problem to have.
Yes, it's a great problem. So am fully in favor of doing this study. Certainly, the other thing that I think about is of course, we're not doing the development over at the old rec center, but I think whatever we decide to do there, we're also going to have to kind of have the foresight to think about that, whatever it is that we decide to put. So, Field of Dreams, I'm sorry, I'm just slow on the uptake today. Field of Dreams, the movie by Kevin Costner. You can tell I'm a Kevin Costner.
Thank you. Councilmember Brown.
Thank you. So when we're looking at this parking plan, we're not looking at it in respect to how we had planned before, putting homes and, look, Becky, this nice little block here, they're not going to be there during the day, so that would be parking?
We're looking at that too.
We're looking at that too.
We're looking at it from an operation standpoint, a current site development perspective, and then also long-range development perspective. The variability on that long range is because we're going to wait a couple years before we revisit the north half. We're going to have to make some assumptions. We've got a plan that you guys have identified in terms of uses and density, so we're going to start with that, but then we're going to figure out flexibility. The other nuance to this is that that's the development side of it, but there's also operational. Do we do valet parking? Do we do shuttle service between here and other parking lots? Do we coordinate with other facilities that may not have parking on the weekends or at night that we could say, can we contract with them to provide overflow parking? So this is, we're gonna cover the gamut of parking aspects when we look at this process.
Okay, so we are going to expand it out. Okay, because that was one of my biggest concerns.
Sure.
Thank you. Councilmember Burns.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. You just answered my question preemptively. I weirdly just listened to a podcast all about parking, because of course. And something that they brought up was an interesting thing for future city planning of utilizing church parking lots, right? They're really only popular on Sundays. How do we utilize them as a city 6 days a week? And so the idea of shuttling to and from and using those spaces that aren't full most of the time, I think is very interesting. How do we contract that out? And because it's a very low environmental impact as well, because those places are exist. We don't have to build anything. So that's super cool. I'm glad.
Yeah, I mean, a great example is Wagon Road is underutilized now. It's not over-sourced. And so when we have a big event where everything is programmed, let's have an activation plan that says, hey, let's go utilize that for overflow parking. It's part of the DNA. We build that into the programming of that type of operation where the facility reaches that threshold and we know, okay, now we got to implement Plan X to go take this into account so we don't have people going, I can't find any parking. So.
Yeah, awesome. Very excited about this parking.
It's a fun planner nerd thing, so it's this is what we do.
Thank you, Councilmember Burns. I just have to say thank you for taking into account seniors, because I'm the liaison to the NSO, the senior organization. So thank you, because I hear that a lot, concerns about parking and during certain events or weekends or whatever the case may be, where it's tougher for them to find parking. And you said something that piqued my interest, and I think it was called off-peak something, but just that concept. So for example, would that entail something along the lines of, there's X amount of spaces that are always open during the day that's not being utilized, or during certain times, and designate those as maybe senior-only parking, but just for certain times, from, just throw a number out there, from 8 to 2. That's not anything, but is that kind of what that is?
The principle that
if I'm
you're getting
understanding?
at is, yes, I don't know if it would specifically apply
Something
and
like-
how you're laying it out, but that's the concept that we're looking at is when City Hall is closed, let's make sure that space is being fully utilized for whatever intended purpose, especially if it's a heavy load day at the rec center. If we have multiple events where, maybe there is a wedding that's going on, maybe we figure out, and there's also a theater event going on, maybe we figure out that we hold spaces in a certain part of the parking area that's reserved for those folks so that they have that ability. That's the type of strategies that we're going to try to understand. What level of parking management do we need to go into, and what does it really look like? And I think the other part of it in my opinion, is that, I've had several conversations with the man, and we've talked about this at the leadership team when it comes to, the distances that seniors used to walk and where they walk now. So maybe it's also having that third party come in and like really lay that out in a different context that maybe helps gets that point across. So there's a whole bunch of opportunities here to help address that aspect of the concern.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited for this study just because it gets their input, because I've heard things like, what about shuttles? What about this? What about that?
Right.
And this will actually give them a chance for their voices to be heard. I was also very excited to see that Jay Renkins of MIG will participate, because I know he was just outstanding, getting input from council, for the whole civic center campus just idea, and really putting our ideas into fruition. So I'm really excited. I think he's going to do a great job on that.
And just a footnote that he's also working on the Parks Master Plan effort, his firm is. And so part of this is there's a synergy here that makes more sense for us to bring that whole together, plus the history that he and his firm have had with this particular site. It just made a lot of sense for us to directly source with him and his team to put this one together.
Yeah, that's great. It looks like you need consensus. I mean, I believe we have consensus for them to move forward with the study. Is that all you need from us?
Like I said, want to make sure we're not missing anything, so.
Okay, thank you so much,
Thank you.
Brooke.
Yep.
Thank you.
The dude. Appreciate you. Great. Moving into public invited to be heard. This is an opportunity for public comment. Statements are limited to 3 minutes per speaker. Comments must be related to an item previously addressed by council during the meeting. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak to council at this time? Is there anyone on the phone who would like to speak to council? You can unmute yourself by pressing *6, but I do not see anyone. There being no further business, we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Remember the 4th of July, Nick?
What's the score?
I didn't think so.
What's the score? We're down.
Oh, no.